All right. Hello, we're back in the studio. This is Erik Peterson, CloudZero CTO and founder, and I've got awesome guests with me today. Khawaja Shams, CEO of
Momento,
and Bill works for a little company called AWS. Bill Tarr, you want to introduce you guys self? Bill, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about how's your day going and what is going on with SaaS Factory, and then I want to hear a little bit from Khawaja.
Yeah, let me introduce the AWS crowd here at reinvent AWS.
Yeah.
Now let me focus in on my team, Erik. My team is a team called the AWS SaaS Factory. I'm a SaaS evangelist, so I spend a lot of time talking to customers about SaaS, working with customers, helping them to build SaaS. We've worked with your company, CloudZero. We've had lots of conversations with Momento, two of my favorite SaaS products this year. So it's really an honor to be here with both of you.
And I could always spend, I could literally spend hours and maybe days. We had this great lunch in San Diego, and I was like, the time just flew by. It's fantastic, right, to have you here, because this is going to be a great conversation. Also, had a great conversation with this gentleman in San Diego. I don't know what it is about San Diego. It's just magic, right?
It was back to back. You had breakfast with me. We went for a walk, and then you had lunch with Bill.
Did it happen on the same day? Gosh,
yeah.
I don't know. It's all a blur to me, but I don't know. That was the day my life changed. Anyway, so you guys are going to change my life today. So Khawaja, tell us a little bit about Momento, man.
Yeah, Momento is a serverless cache and a serverless messaging product. We build a platform to help developers get to production really, really quickly, bring low latency workflows and add interactivity to their apps without failing it, regardless of the scale that they're at. So,
I love those single digit low latencies, man. Let me tell you, like it's living the serverless lifestyle. Last night we were living the serverless lifestyle.
Oh yeah.
It was fantastic. So here we are. It's Thursday. reinvent's wrapping up. I think the word of the day is cost optimization, but actually something amazing happened to me, which was I'm sitting there watching Werner's keynote this morning. And as I'm sitting there watching Nubank talk about things, I'm like, I can't believe, how much conversation has shifted. Because what struck me was actually one of the things that we talked about actually at breakfast, Khawaja, was, the last time I saw Werner up on that stage talking about cost as like kind of a positive benefit of the cloud, it was back in 2013. And here we are it could be actually 10 years to the day that he's up there talking about it again, fundamental kind of important kind of quality. He called it a non-functional requirement, which also blew my mind because from my perspective, it's always been a non-functional requirement. I think I started talking about that with another friend of mine, Jeremy Daly. We did a podcast in 2019 talking about non-functional requirements with cost. But you've probably heard me say this a few times before. I'm going to say it again. Every engineering decision is a buying decision in this world that we live in, right? And so I sent that to Werner at that moment, and 2 seconds later, he's up on stage. As somebody just said on Twitter, every engineering is buying decision. At that point, I was basically done for the week, right? But what was your reaction today to his keynote? Like, listening to what he was talking about, I don't know. Give me your perspective, AWS perspective, Momento's perspective, or just three dudes talking about cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Erik, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about cost this year, the culture of cost.
Yeah.
It's a topic. 2023 has hit a lot of companies hard. Funding has changed. Investors are viewing SaaS companies in a different light. So we'd always talked about SaaS as a growth model. You need to be able to grow, acquire new customers. But now we're being held under the microscope of being able to sustainably grow.
Yeah.
And cost, if you don't understand the cost of supporting your product, the unit economics, what's the cost per tenant, what's the cost per tier?
That's where our conversation started, around the unit economics of it all. Like such a powerful concept that kind of boggles the mind when you finally understand it. Think about your cost in terms of what it costs to serve the value to your customers. Right?
100%, right? And smart SaaS companies have that awareness and can express to anyone who's interested, hey, how is your company going to sustain your growth? Well, this is how much it costs to support an individual customer.
Yeah.
This new feature we're going to add, that's going to cost us this much per tenant or customer that we have on our platform. And getting to that visibility, Erik, that's where you and I spend most of our time talking, right?
I know. And then when I was having breakfast with Khawaja, we started talking. At first, I was like, one of the greatest keynote presentations I ever saw was the launch of Kinesis. And Khawaja's like, that was me, right? And I'm like, you're joking, right? And he's like, no, really. I'm like, hold on. And I pull up my phone because I have a recording of it on my phone, actually, because I keep this stuff around forever. And I'm looking at it and I like listen to it and I'm like, oh crap, it really is. Like I didn't do my homework. But it was I think that was 2013, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And And then we got deeper into kind of conversation. I think I said something that kind of like, you just did this like double take. What did you just say? And I was like, oh yeah, I've got this shoebox of like $1 million lines of code that I've been collecting. And you just like, I think you like, if you could have, you would reach across the table and say, you've got to do something with that, right? Yeah.
Well, I think there's a preface to that. You were telling me about how at CloudZero, you don't want to be an accounting company. You don't want to be a spreadsheet that's just labeling your costs from highest to lowest, because that is the easy way, and that's not the most effective way.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not just about visualizing and sorting by your dollar spend, because the highest cost item may not be the most actionable cost.
Totally.
And the other piece of it that we discussed right before you got into the $1 million line of code was you're telling me about how you want to facilitate better engineering for your customers.
Yeah. I want to change how people build software.
That's right. And that's why every engineering decision is a buying decision.
Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned those things. And then you said that you have the shoebox of $1 million lines of code.
Right.
And that struck me because so often some of the most profound changes, destructive or constructive, are one line of code. Famous last words, just one line of code. I'm just going to push it to prod tonight. It's Friday night. YOLO. Nope.
Yeah.
You could destroy the whole thing. But sometimes a line of code can save you millions of dollars. And when I heard you say that, it really profoundly captured how simple, cost savings could be and how they can lead to better engineering. And then you gave me a set of examples where people were able to use a single line of code that not only saved them $1 million a year or more, but it actually improved the customer experience.
Right.
And it confronts this fallacy that we have that if you're reducing costs, you are compromising availability, you're compromising performance. And the reality is, every time I've gone through a rigorous cost optimization exercise, whether it's for services I manage at AWS, whether it's outside for my own company or for customers, end up with a better engineered solution.
Yeah, there's this tight coupling between well-architected solution and a cost-effective one or efficient one, right? And and then you gave me what I still think is one of the highlights of my shoebox collection. When you started talking about DynamoDB and some of the limitations there, I would love for you to actually tell a little bit of what that story you told me there, because I'm still enamored to hear you tell it. I think you tell it better than anyone.
It's quite simple. DynamoDB charges you per kilobyte. So when you write to a DynamoDB, an IOP is 1 kilobyte of an object. So whether you're writing 100 byte object or 1 kilobyte object, you consume 1 write capacity unit. Problem comes when you suddenly exceed the 1 kilobyte threshold, and you go from 1 kilobyte to 1 kilobyte and 1 byte. Suddenly, your write costs are doubled.
Yeah.
And we had a customer where we were able to just make a couple of very simple changes, like change the way they were storing timestamps and rename some of the attributes to bring them back from above a kilobyte boundary to below a kilobyte boundary for their items. This halved their write cost. Now, Dynamo writes are way more expensive than Dynamo reads.
Yeah. So
suddenly, by making these really minor changes, their write IOPS became half the price.
Yeah.
There's more.
Yeah, but wait, there's more.
In Dynamo, each throughput, each partition can only write 1,000 times a second. And now that limit gets halved if it's a 2 kilobyte object. So you can only write a 2 kilobyte object 500 times a second. So a 1.0001 object, 500 times a second. So by creaming that boundary, by crossing to the other side of that boundary, we actually helped improve the availability. And then I like to joke, you made the object more aerodynamic on the wire. Because if you're processing less data, if you're storing less data, not only are you saving storage costs, but there's less junk that you have to process and parse and throw away at the end.
Oh, and that's exactly what Werner was talking about at one point during his keynote. Why send that 6 gigabyte file across the wire if it's just going to be rendered down to 500K, right?
Right.
Why do these things? Think logically about what you're trying to do. You can be sustainable in the bits that you're sending down the line. You can think about how much compute it actually takes. I mean, it's all interrelated.
Erik, caching is an interesting aspect of this as
Yes.
well.
Oh,
Maybe we want to segue to something about this company I've heard about called Momento.
Oh yeah, there is a slice of there. Yeah, we should. Yeah, so clearly this led you down the path to create Momento. I mean, geez, we got to learn a little bit about that.
Well, I'm a big believer in multi-tenanted services. I think multi-tenanted services, they're a most profound example of where cost optimization actually leads to deeper innovation that results in better availability, better elasticity, and better developer experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the set of services, so the most profound services in AWS, S3, DynamoDB, SQS, they're all multi-tenanted. And what that means is you're not provisioning S3 bucket capacity units. You want to write something, you just do a put. Doesn't matter if it's a 5 gigabyte. Doesn't matter if you want to, or it's 1 byte. Doesn't matter if you want to upload 1,000 of them. There's no provisioning. You just write.
Yeah.
And the capacity management and the utilization becomes the S3 team's problem.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last, 16 years, 17 years, the S3 team has been hard at work, just optimizing the hell out of the utilization, out of the cost. And the customers, we just keep getting benefits, right? And all of this happens due to two reasons. One is the multi-tenanted aspect, and the other is the API, right? So customers get advantage of all of the innovations that are happening behind the scenes in a really efficient manner.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the insight that we had. And we realized that when people have caching, they typically provision machines. And in almost every scenario that I've observed, they over provision their machines because you don't want to deal with, you don't want to be short on capacity during your peak.
You're afraid of the bad user experience because you don't have enough capacity.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you provision for your peak, and you almost never hit your peak, except when you do, it's a really bad day. So there's this tension of having to provision for peak, but then not having to provision too much because you can actually cause, like a financial risk to the company as well.
Well, we have infinite scale. We don't have infinite wallet, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And this is where every engineering decision, the buying decision comes into place, because this lazy approach of let me just double my capacity is actually quite bad. Because it tricks you into ignoring some of the risks that you might take, because sometimes doubling your capacity may not actually improve your availability at all. You might still get a hot shard or hot partition. So what we do at Momento is we built a multi-tenanted fleet. We do the capacity management. We have the automation in place, and customers can just come in and spike as they may wish. And we are just absorbing their spikes, and we're doing that capacity management. And we're taking common caching outages and we're just engineering our way around it so that customers aren't learning caching lessons one outage at a time.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. And there's been a lot of outages over the years, and the finger points back to caching, right? Or over provision, or trying to solve these problems with these blunt instruments, right? Not thinking about it. And these are topics near and dear to my heart. I mean, I've been living the serverless lifestyle. I like to say, since CloudZero was started, we went all in on serverless. And every time we think, oh, maybe we should, try something, we're like, no, it's taking this complexity out of the way that we have to manage and operationalize this. And when I first learned about Momento, I was like, finally something that is aligned in the caching space that is aligned with this serverless lifestyle, perfectly aligned with this serverless lifestyle, to be honest. So it's truly awesome what you built there. And gosh, I mean, if you haven't checked it out, if anybody hasn't taken a look at it, they need to take a look at it.
Thank you.
So I want to pull it back to a little bit about, what Werner was talking about today when he's up on the stage, the stories around, cost as a non-functional requirement and things like that. And Bill, and like going back to the conversation we had at lunch, talking about cost. What was your reaction, thinking about this? I'm sure, you're sitting there like many, AWSers thinking, well, finally we're talking about this because our customers have been talking about this, and it's our opportunity to shine,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And first, give them credit for getting up there and acknowledging that it has been a challenging year for a lot of our customers. Cost has become more of a topic. We're becoming more aware of cost. We've been aware of cost for a long time. We've been preaching to SaaS customers that they need to be able to account for those costs. but it's affected everyone this year. And Erik, I want to pull this back to one of the things that Khawaja was just saying.
Mhm.
Multi-tenancy has tremendous benefits to our customers.
Mhm.
It also comes at a cost.
Yeah.
Right? There are specific things that we really have to be able to deal with. And one of those is, how do we allocate out those costs in a
Mhm.
multi-tenant solution
Mhm.
when we're using this shared infrastructure? So there's this other company I've heard of called CloudZero that has a great product. We actually wrote a blog about it a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
Almost maybe a year and a half ago now.
I know, but it's a great one. You know,
It's a great blog.
We need to do a part 2.
We absolutely do. And as we're thinking about what it means to allocate out those costs, one of the challenges that we have is you really don't have any way in AWS to figure out, hey, my AWS bill was $100. I used Lambdas, I used DynamoDB, I used an API gateway. What tenants account for those costs, right? And it really, you are at some point going to have to instrument your code. You're going to have to be able to break those costs down, because it's not going to appear on your AWS bill.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're not going to be able to say Khawaja costs, $30 to operate, and Erik costs $40, and Bill costs $20.
Yeah.
We're not going to get to that point. But it can be challenging to get to the actual underlying cost. Use your cost and usage report, which is your AWS delineated bill, and figure out how to break down those costs on your own. So using a solution like CloudZero is one of the easiest ways that we point customers to.
I mean, I love it, because a lot of times customers come to me and say, I would love to do this, but I feel like it's a pipe dream. And we sit down and they say, well, you already have a lot of these metrics, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You're already trying to understand your customers. You're trying to understand what they're doing. A lot of times we find people have actually built a lot of metrics around what they've done. And that's one of the powers of our platform, is that we realized not too long ago, like, it's not about just pulling in the cost data. It's about all the observability metrics that are going on in the environment. What's actually happening, right? So we can get down to that cost per tenant, cost per feature, cost per transaction, whatever costs to deliver value, right? And when people start to interact with what they're spending, it becomes pretty powerful. But it also ties it back to the engineer, because engineers want to understand things in context to what they're working on. And you don't necessarily connect, your work with an EC2 instance. You connect your work with the feature team that you're on, right? And so I've seen customers where they start to get this view, and the engineers go, wait, what? And then they drill down and they see it. And we can even pull in, things like query logs, for example, from like Redshift or Aurora, and get to the cost per query, right?
Yeah.
For a particular customer, and not just an average, but like, this is the actual cost for that query to run. Oh, I forgot an index, right? Boom, they've automatically like fixed their bill. Whereas before it was, I have no idea. It just seems like it costs a lot of money, but I'm never going to be able to figure it out.
Right.
Really insightful. Yeah.
I think.
Well, please go ahead. Yeah.
I think you're underselling one beneficiary of this type of insight at a customer, which is the product management.
Mm.
The level of insight that you gain tells you where customers are driving the usage, which customers are driving the most usage, and that could give you a signal about whether it's a degenerate customer, or maybe that's just a really happy customer that because they're using your platform more. And it can also give you deep insights about what parts of your product are being used. And this is an unintended side effect, positive one, of getting deeper and more intimate with, the cost of running your system.
Yeah.
And it can lead to more innovation. And like, I totally get the engineer gets benefit, and they can see a direct impact of their work and all that. But I think you can make products better by understanding the cost dynamics as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen customers get their arms around this by realizing, wait a second, we have a piece of functionality that's really expensive, but nobody's using it.
Yep.
Right. And they didn't have an engineering problem. They just had a lack of visibility problem right into that. And this allocation kind of superpower to break apart these icebergs, right? That, whether it's Kubernetes or a large database cluster or just a multi-tenant system, particularly if you've gone all in on Lambda, right? That's a very multi-tenant system. Being able to decompose that into the parts that make sense to you, and then get that deeper understanding. I would love the product management community to actually be more engaged here. It's actually one area where I've been trying to get folks to kind of think more about it, because it can affect pricing decisions and these like fundamental things that anybody who's building a SaaS product really needs to be thinking about. So, well, I don't know, Bill, you want to?
No, yeah. I just want to jump in really quick, because the things we're talking about understanding the cost of operating your features, I'm thinking about Momento. You guys have a 3-tiered pricing plan, if I'm not mistaken, right? How do you even come to think about how you're going to price those tiers if you don't understand the underlying costs of those features? And a lot of SaaS providers I talk to, they understand they need to have pricing tiers. They understand they have to package their product in different ways to appeal to other customers. But hey, if you're doing this, how are you doing it if you can't figure out what those underlying features cost, right? So I look at good SaaS providers, and usually I see pricing tiers that have been well thought out, have a lot of visibility into the underlying cost. And that's not how you set your price, but that's an input into your pricing. And if you're missing that input, you're almost certainly missing the correct pricing points for your tiers.
I mean, you should always price on value, right?
Right.
You know, but it's really, really helpful that you understand the cost to deliver that value.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, you could find out that the hard way that you're putting yourself out of business.
Yes.
Right? Later, when your company's scaling and you discover that you've got way too many of those $1 million lines of code.
You know, especially now with Gen AI features are not inexpensive. It's just a simple fact.
You don't
of life.
say.
Right. You might have noticed.
Yeah.
And everyone's talking about them. Everyone's thinking about how they can deliver these Gen AI features without really thinking about what it costs to operate them and how you're going to package those. You know, for example, you have an advanced tier to your pricing, right? Maybe we need to put those specific features that involve Gen AI into that advanced tier. One, gets customers to try to move up to that tier. But two, it also accounts for the fact that they're expensive, right? And we might even want to put consumption-based pricing. Say every time you use this feature, we're going to charge you 10 cents, whatever that looks like. So thinking about those and having that deep level of understanding is really the only way to get to a fair and equitable pricing across your different tiers, and to attract these different customers, be able to go down market or up market and attract different types of customers from the ones you already have.
Totally.
I think if I may interrupt.
You can interrupt me anytime.
No, one of the things I love about SaaS Factory and the team that Bill is on is when I talk to Bill, I feel like I'm back at AWS with very rigorous product management. And it is really, really counterintuitive that somebody at Amazon is sitting there helping other SaaS providers think through some really profound product decisions. And it has a really profound impact on the growth of such companies. And it's a big service to the partner ecosystem in ways that are, not easy to appreciate. So these types of conversations and basically creating a forum where people can, share these lessons with each other, builds that community and sharing best practices like CloudZero and so forth. I think it's a really good way to make sure that the partner ecosystem continues to thrive inside of AWS.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I can't possibly reinforce that any more than just to say, I think our success as a company, CloudZero's success, has been directly a result of that relationship that we built with SaaS Factory. I mean, it helped us iterate very early time about how we were going to break apart Kubernetes costs. It helped us iterate on just thinking about the fundamentals around cost per tenant and unit cost. And that was, at a time where we had these ideas, but we needed to kind of bounce this, these thoughts off other people's minds. And I feel like SaaS Factory is one of those best kept secrets that we've got to make not a best kept secret anymore. Everybody should be kind of interacting with this team because it really did, I think, change the trajectory of our company. So,
I think that's the best compliment you can give our team.
Not just this conversation, but honestly, I mean, seriously, at the end of the day, I want to build a very successful company here, but you can't go it alone, right? And Amazon's been a great partner for that, right? And I'm looking forward to Momento being a great partner of that as well as we kind of scale this thing out because you can imagine stuff's getting pretty busy for us. So, all right. So I want to wrap up real quickly here. We're going to come back and have this conversation in a year's time. What do we think is going to be on the docket? What are we going to be talking about a year from now? In light of all this, conversation around cost, Werner's keynote, what we kind of see ahead of us. If we want to make some crazy predictions here, this is the time to do it. So what do we think is going to be ahead of us as we get to this point next year?
I think I'll take a stab at that. As I'm thinking about how the SaaS landscape evolves, I'm increasingly seeing customers having intelligent conversations about cost rather than just our AWS bill is too high. SaaS providers that survive this economic downturn are going to survive it with more knowledge about how to operate their solution. And we're going to take that cost conversation to the next level. We're not just going to be talking about what does it cost for my AWS bill, not even just was it a cost per tenant, but how am I continuing to develop a cost culture within my organization so that every decision that we make, every engineering decision we make, which might be $1 million decision,
Mhm.
right, is actually going through the cost lens. Our product teams, our finance teams, and our engineering teams are starting to work together. So this is my happy utopia universe that we're
Yeah.
going to be in by the time we get back together next year.
I would love nothing more, and I believe that one day is going to happen.
Awesome.
What's your thoughts, Khawaja, on the future?
I think that this time next year, we're going to be in a different type of a renaissance.
Hmm.
I don't think people are going to be cutting costs because of an economic downturn anymore. I suspect instead of just saying AI, we're going to be talking about very specific use cases. And we're going to have products that are going to be out by then that are so successful, but are almost untenable to run at scale without hardcore engineering and hardcore cost optimization. So I think we're going to be in a much better time where the level of innovation and the market, I suspect, is going to be in a much better place. And, because you got to do cost optimization in the good times and in the bad times, because in good times, success and the exponential growth is there. So I suspect people are going to be cost optimizing because of success and adoption, because of this awesome influx of AI applications. Actual useful applications
Mhm.
are going to hit the consumers. And I can't wait for that future.
Yeah, it's going to require that really deep level of kind of engineering expert, deep kind of thinking about it in order to get those to where they need to be. So kind of riffing off of that, kind of continuing that thought, I think, so one of the things that I've always worked myself kind of backwards from when I think about CloudZero is sometimes I tell people, like, there's a point in time already where we've done what ultimately I wanted to set out to do, which is change how software is built, right? Particularly in the cloud, of course. And that period of time exists in the future, and I'm just working my way there. And I think we're much closer to there for a lot of the same, reasons that you gave, both of you, right? That we're looking at no longer optimizing because we're trying to lower the bill, but we're optimizing because we're trying to be that much more efficient in delivery of value, because it's good for the planet. It's good for engineering. It's a constraint that drives innovation, right? Good engineering has always been driven by constraints, and we've had all these constraints peeled away. Thank you, Bill, for being part of AWS and peeling away those constraints. But a good constraint actually can push us to innovate and build. And I think as we kind of develop cost as I used to call it must be an operational metric for building software, or you can call it a non-functional requirement. It is something that can drive innovation. And often people say, well, if I have my engineers focusing on cost, aren't they going to start slowing down? I'm like, actually, I see quite the opposite already. So what I predict, from a year's time now is actually we'll be talking about it as one of the greatest constraints that ever drove innovation. We're going to see an enormous amount of innovation as a result, that engineers are going to be seeing cost as like that thing that kind of set the creative juices flowing. And we're going to see some really interesting architectures that just have never existed before start to emerge. And hopefully we're all part of it. So anyways, so I look forward to coming back next year. This is going to be fantastic. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Of course. Thank you
This
for
has
having
been
us.
Eric. Yeah.
Unbelievable time out here at reinvent in Las Vegas again. So anyways, I want to say thank you to our audience. Thank you to my guests, and thank you for being part of this journey. Remember, every engineering decision is a buying decision. We'd love to help you make a better buying decision, figure out how you allocate your costs, figure out how you can focus in on bringing your engineers into that conversation. But let's innovate together. Let's build great software together. We're going to have a great time doing it. Take care.